Hi everyone. We continue our discussions about blood. Today we are in part 4. We will talk about hemostasis. Hemo means blood and stasis means stable condition. So this is the process how our body control our bleeding. So how our system agglutinate or clotting the blood when we are bleeding. Okay, so again, hemostasis means stoppage of bleeding. And there are 3 main stages for this process to prevent blood loss. The first one is called the blood vessel or vascular spasms. The second one is platelet plaque formations. And the last one is called the blood coagulation. So before we discuss or explain one by one, just to make sure you know the components of blood, there are 2 main components. Okay, so the bottom one over here is the foam element. Which is the cells of the blood. Okay, there are 3 main type of foam elements. The most abundant one is red blood cell. Okay, the second one is called the platelets. And the last one is the white blood cell. Okay, so from these 3 foam elements, the one that is needed for blood coagulations or stopping the bleeding is the platelets. Okay, so from this component, we're gonna talk about the platelets, how the platelets stop the bleeding. And the top portions of the blood is called the plasma. Okay, and the plasma mostly consists of water, so 92% water. Okay, the second component is called the proteins. And remember again, there are 3 main types of proteins in the blood plasma. The first one is albumin. The second one is globulin. Okay, and the last one is the fibrinogen. Okay, and then from these 3 proteins, the one that needed for blood coagulations or stopping the bleeding is the fibrinogen. So we have platelet plus fibrinogens. These are the 2 components that will help us to stop bleeding. And there is another component in the plasma, others component, especially over here that needed for blood coagulation is electrolyte, which is the main one is calcium. So we need calcium for stopping the blood. Also, there is another component which is the vitamin K. It is also located in the blood plasma that will also need it for clotting the blood. Okay, so just remember these components, the cell, the platelets, protein, fibrinogens, electrolyte calcium and vitamin K. Those are the ones that will be useful for clotting our blood when we are bleeding. Now we go back to the stages over here. The first stage is called the blood vessel or vascular spasms. So when, for example, this is blood vessel, okay, when there is something cut our blood vessel, okay, let's say the blood going this way, okay, so this is cut over here. So when something cut our blood vessel, then we will be bleeding. So our blood will be out from the blood vessels. So we have the risk of losing the blood. Okay, so the first stage will be constrictions in this area. So the blood vessel will be constrict over here, so it will slow down the flowings of the blood. Okay, so this is the first natural stage of stoppage of bleeding, which is vascular spasms. Okay, we can actually make a comparison with, for example, if we have a hose for gardening, okay, when the hose leaking over here, what we do, we usually pinch this area. Okay, so we constrict this part of the hose. Okay? It will help to slow down the water that running to the leaky area over here. So it's very similar process in our blood vessels. When it is bleeding, then the area before that leak will constrict, okay? And this stage or this process is called the vascular spasm. The second process is called the platelet plaques formation. It is done by these platelets. Okay, so the platelets that we have in our blood, which is part of the blood component, will be going to this area, and they kind of plugging the holes, the leak on the blood vessel. Okay, so most of the platelet will go to the same area over here to plug the leak. Okay, so this is why it's called the platelet plug formation. And then after it is plugged, of course, the blood still leaking, but it is slowly. Okay, so we need to seal this area. Okay, we need to seal this leaky area. And this is the third process. It's called the blood coagulation. And for this process, then we need this protein over here, okay, the fibrinogens, together with the calcium and vitamin K, will make the glue that will seal this area. So fibrinogens will be converted into fibrin. And fibrin is a thread-like protein that will seal this area together with the calcium, vitamin K, and some other factors. So this is the 3 stages of stoppage of bleeding or hemostasis. Okay, start with the vascular spasms, platelet plaque formations, and then finally blood coagulations. Now we're gonna see one by one. Okay, for the vascular spasms, okay, the stimulus will be direct stimulus to vessel walls or to pain receptor. So when we are bleeding, sometimes we have pain, and it is really will be received or sensed by pain receptor. And then the platelet will release serotonin. a chemical that will cause our smooth muscle in the blood vessel to constrict the blood vessel, and this process is called the vasoconstriction. Okay, so the smooth muscle will be constricted. Okay, so this is the effects going to be smooth muscle walls contracts, and then it will causing the vasoconstrictions, and this will help the slow down the blood circulations on to the leaky area. The second one is platelet plaque formations. Okay, so the platelets will be aggregate in the leaky area, so they adhere or they attach to the surface of the broken blood vessels, and then finally they will make the plaque. And the last one, the blood coagulations. This is the blood clot will form, and this clot will seal the broken blood vessels. So there are some series of reactions to form this blood clot. Okay, the main event is conversion of the fibrinogen, the plasma proteins that mostly dissolve, you cannot see it. When it is converted into fibrins, it's become thread-like protein, and again it will seal the damaged blood vessel. Okay, so vascular spasm, this is the first stage. It is stimulated by the cutting or breaking of small blood vessels. The smooth muscle in the blood vessel will contract rapidly to constrict the vessels. It will slow the blood loss very quickly. Triggered by stimulation of blood vessel wall, pain receptor reflexes. Responses usually last for a few minutes, but the effect continues for about 30 minutes. So this will allow the time for the platelet plaque and also blood coagulations or clotting the blood. Serotonin released by the platelet is the one that causes the smooth muscle to perform this action, the vasoconstrictions or this vascular spasm. So this is the first stage. The second stage, platelet plaque formations. Again, if you see, this is a broken blood vessels. Okay, and then the platelets in blood plasma will go to this broken vessel, and then they will aggregate together, okay, to form this plaque. So this plaque will causing the bleeding to be stopped for a while, but maybe still there are some leaky blood or blood loss happenings. Therefore, there will be the third process or stage over here to stop the bleeding, and that stage is called the blood coagulation. Okay. So blood clot is actually a series of reactions. There are two initiations for this blood clot, maybe extrinsic factor and intrinsic factor or mechanisms. Vitamin K is one of the substances needed to form the blood clot. Okay, so this is one of the clotting factor. And of course, the protein, the fibrinogens, is also needed to clot the blood. These fibrinogens will be, this is insolubles, which is the fibrins over here. Okay, so from the soluble fibrinogen, it will be converted into insoluble thread-like protein, is called the fibrin. So we see under the microscope, you see this is the fibrin thread that is actually converted from fibrinogens. Okay, so fibrinogen is dissolved type of protein. When it is converted into fibrin, then it's become thread-like structure that will clot the broken blood vessel. Okay, so for the clotting mechanism, the extrinsic clotting mechanism is triggered by the blood coming in contact with tissue outside the blood vessels or damaged walls of blood vessel. So when there is a broken blood vessels, then the blood will be in contact with tissue outside the blood vessel. It will trigger this clotting. So this is extrinsic clotting mechanism. Then the damaged tissue will release thromboplastin, which is a protein. It is also known as factor number 3. Then this series of process will activate several other clotting factors. Okay, the thrombin will convert the fibrinogens into fibrin, and the fibrin thread will stick together, okay, on the damaged blood vessel, and then trap the blood cell and platelet, and this is what we call the blood clot. So it's the blood clot together, agglutinate together in this broken area. And this is example of positive feedback mechanism, because whenever blood clot is increasing, then there will be more blood clot, there will be more platelet coming to this area. So this is a response actually increase or add the stimulus, okay, going to the same direction. The intrinsic clotting mechanism, it can start without damage of tissue. So for example, it's blood vessels, there is no damage in the blood vessel, but suddenly there are some clot in our blood vessels. So this is caused by what we call the intrinsic factor or intrinsic clotting mechanism. Sometimes it's dangerous when, you know, suddenly in our blood we have a blood clot. So usually activated when the blood comes in contact with the foreign surface, such as maybe collagens, instead of in contact with the endothelium of the blood vessel. So there is a foreign substance maybe, or maybe collagens that in contact with the blood, causing the blood to have a series of clottings in this blood vessel. This is triggered by factor 12. It's called the Hageman factors. This is found inside the blood. And then there will be series of activations, which is this factor number 12 will causing the formation of factor number 10. And then at the end, this mechanism will also produce the fibrin, okay, which is conversion of fibrinogen into fibrin. And then finally, will causing the blood clot inside the blood vessel. If we compare between the extrinsic factor and intrinsic factors, the trigger for the extrinsic factor usually because of blood, broken blood vessels, so damage on the blood vessel, it will trigger these extrinsic clotting mechanisms. For the intrinsics, there is no blood vessel broken. However, if the blood contact with foreign substance, like collagen, for example, then it will start the mechanism of clotting. The initiations for extrinsic factor is the thromboplastin. Okay, this is factor number 3. And for the intrinsic mechanism, the initiation is factor number 12, the hegemon factor. And then for the extrinsic clotting mechanism, the prothrombin will be the activator. It's going to be the same with the intrinsic factor. Prothrombin then will be converted into thrombin. So this is the same process, intrinsic or extrinsic. And the final process, this thrombin then will convert the fibrinogens into fibrin thread. Okay, fibrinogen into fibrin thread. Okay, so it's going to be the final results will be the same, which is the fibrins will become what we call the blood clot. Okay, and extrinsic start with the damage of the blood vessel. Intrinsics, there is no damage in the blood vessel, but some intrinsic factor like collagens can cause this clotting inside the blood vessel. This is showing us the mechanisms for the extrinsics and the intrinsics clotting mechanism. Again, for the extrinsic, start with the tissue damage or blood vessel damage. When the blood in contact with tissue outside the blood vessel, then it will be releasing the factor number 3. So this is the initiator for blood clotting. And this factor number 3 with factor number 7 then activate the process. To activate the process, then we need the calcium. So this is the function of calcium over here. It will activate this factor to create factor number 10. Okay, so this is one sequence over here. Now, if we want to see the intrinsic clotting mechanism, is that when the blood in contact with the foreign substance, maybe like collagens, it will activate the initiator. So for the intrinsic mechanism, the initiator is factor number 12. And then it will activate factor number 11. And then become factor number 9. And then this with the calcium, so again, we need the calcium in order to clot the blood, will produce factor number 10. Okay, so this is one process for the intrinsic clotting mechanism. Now, for the extrinsics and intrinsic mechanism, starting from factor number 10, the process will be the same, which is we need calcium to activate this factor, the factor 10 to activate the prothrombin. Okay, so the prothrombin, when it is activated, become factor number 2, it will be converted into thrombin. This is 2A. Okay. And this, we also need factor number 5 over here in order to activate the prothrombin into thrombin. And then these thrombins will be used to convert the fibrinogen, which is factor number 1, into fibrin thread. And we need another factor over here, number 13, to create clot of this fibrin. Okay. So this is the process of clotting, whether from extrinsic mechanism or intrinsic clotting mechanism. Okay, now we're gonna see the factor one by one. Again, factor number 1 is actually the fibrinogens, the dissolved proteins in our blood plasma. And then factor number 2 is prothrombin. This is the one that converted into thrombin. And then number 3 is thromboplastin. It will be converted into prothrombin. Factor number 4 is calcium ions. There is another protein called the proaccelerin, factor number 5. And then serum prothrombin, this is factor number 7. There is another protein, anti-hemophilic factor, thromboplasmin, number 9. Number 10 is another proteins, Stuart power factor, plasma thromboplasmin, number 11. 12 is Hageman factor, and the last one is factor number 13 is fibrin stabilizing factor. Now, in order to create some of these factors, our body needs vitamin K. So vitamin K is required to convert one factor to another factor. Okay, so again, for here, if we see one by one, we need fibrinogens. We also need vitamin K. We need calciums, and we need the platelet for clotting factor. Okay, now what happened with the blood clot after they finish the sealing the broken blood vessels? Okay, so after a blood clot form, then it will retract, okay, from the broken blood vessel. So it will leaving the broken blood vessels and squeezing out from the blood vessels. So the one that out from the blood vessel now is called as a serum. Okay, so serum is actually plasma minus of clotting factor, okay, fibrinogen and clotting factor. Of course, in this serum, there will be other proteins, including antibody will be present in the serum, but there is no clotting factor and no fibrinogens in the blood serum. Okay, and then the platelet-derived growth factor will repair the damage on the blood vessels. And finally, plasmin. So this is a protein produced in the blood plasma, will digest the fibrin thread and dissolve the blood clot. So when the blood vessels seal, then all of this clot will be removed and digested by this protein called the plasmin. Now, sometimes there is a abnormality in blood clotting. There are several names or conditions for this, like for example, thrombus, So this is an abnormal blood clot that form in the blood vessel. So this is general name for abnormal blood clot in blood vessel. If it is happenings in the blood vessel that supply our vital organs like brain and the heart, that thrombus is called the thrombosis. So this is the terminology for blood clot in a vessel that supply vital organs like brain and the heart. Embolus, this is a terminology for a blood clot that moving. Okay, so moving inside the blood vessels. Okay? And usually it will be clogging the smaller blood vessels. Embolism is the blood clot that travel and then block a blood vessel. Example is pulmonary embolisms, which is the embolus, okay, or the blood clot that moving to the lungs blood vessel and block the circulations in the lung. So this is what we call the pulmonary embolisms. There is another terminology, it's called the atherosclerosis. This is general term for any substance, mostly lipids like cholesterol, that accumulate in the blood vessels, especially the arteries. Okay, when it is accumulated in the artery, it can block the circulation. It might also causing clot formations. So this is going to be intrinsic clotting mechanisms. And then the results is called the infarction or infarction, which is the dead tissue on the organs where the blood vessels are blocked. So infarction is the dead tissue of the organ that do not receive the blood circulation or do not receive the blood. This is showing us the normal blood vessel. If you see the lumen of the blood vessel is nice. Okay, there is nothing blocking these blood vessels. So this is the smooth muscles over here. And if you see, this is fat or lipid, mostly, cholesterol. It's actually making this blockage, and this is what we call the atherosclerosis. Okay, the accumulations of lipids on the blood vessel wall, causing the blood vessel lumen is become smaller. So the blood will not flowing easily, or maybe even sometimes will be blocked by this atherosclerosis. Okay, for the clinical applications, there is a condition, it's called the deep vein thrombosis or DVT. And this is usually caused by the stagnant blood on the area in the femoral and popliteal veins and deep vein of the pelvis. So this is in our leg. Sometimes it's caused by immobility, like for example, if we take travels with the airplane and we don't just sit down for a long time, it can cause this condition, okay, deep vein thrombosis. So the blood actually clot in this area. Sometimes that clotting, which is the embolus, can go or travel to other place. It's called the embolism. And for example, if you go to the lung, for example, can cause pulmonary embolism. Okay. Symptoms of DVT like deep muscle pain, cramping, redness, swelling, and dilations of surface of the veins. The clot might break off hours or days after formation. So maybe it will be dissolved by the plasmin several hours or several days after the formations. Some preventions that we can do, for example, taking the anticoagulant medications, compression stocking, or exercise during travels. So don't just sit down for a long time. We might walking around on the airplanes in order to prevent the formation of this deep vein thrombosis or DVT. Okay, so this is natural prevention of coagulation. So we know that our blood is flowing nicely because we have the ability to control or to prevent blood coagulations in our blood vessels. So the first one is the smooth lining of normal blood vessel. So this smooth lining of normal blood vessels will discourage or prevent accumulation of platelets and clotting factor in the blood vessel. So the platelets, the clotting factors will continuously flowing with the plasma, okay, with the blood circulation. It will not attach to the blood vessel. Also, the endothelial cell, okay, so the inside layer of the blood vessel will produce natural blood thinner. It's called the prostacyclin, which is a type of prostaglandin number 2. Okay, so this prostaglandins number 2 or the prostacyclins will prevent the platelet from sticking to the blood vessel wall. Okay, so this is the function of prostacyclin, to prevent platelet from sticking to the cell at the blood vessel walls. And if, for example, there is a clot formations, then the fibrins absorb the thrombin. So the fibrin will absorb the thrombin, so the thrombin will not causing the series of clottings in the blood. Okay, so prevent the clotting reaction from spreading inside the blood vessel. There is another natural substance that we produce, is called the antithrombin. So this one will inactivate the thrombin. Okay, it's not only fibrins will attach to the thrombins, there is also antithrombin that will inactivate the thrombin. Okay, so the series of blood clotting will be prevented. Some cells like basophil and mast cell also secrete another blood thinner, okay, anticoagulation, is called the heparin. So this is one of the anticoagulant that naturally produced by our cell, especially basophil and mast cell. So this is the process that will prevent the blood coagulations inside our blood vessel. And this is the one that will cause our blood to be flowing nicely and naturally. Okay, so again, if we list the factor, the natural factor that inhibit blood clotting formation, the first one is the smooth lining of blood vessel. It will prevent the platelets to attach on the blood vessel wall, also some other factors. And then prostacyclin, this is prostaglandin number 2. It will inhibit the attachment of platelets on the blood vessel wall. Fibrin thread, it will absorb the thrombin, so the thrombin will not be active. And then there is also antithrombin. It will interfere or inactivate the thrombin, so the thrombin will not causing the blood clotting. And finally, heparin. So this is an anticoagulant produced by mast cell and basophil that will also prevent the thrombin formations. There are some disease or inherited disorders of blood. For example, is chronic granulomatous disease. And in these conditions, the patients or the individuals actually unable to phagocyte bacteria, and mostly this individual will have higher risk of bacteria and fungi infection. So they kind of lose a little bit their defense mechanism against bacteria and fungi. So this is chronic granulomatous disease. This is inherited disease. Another one is erythrocytosis, and the name is telling you the formations or production of erythrocyte or red blood cell will be increasing. So this individual actually have more red blood cell. Okay? So it can increase the high risk of getting the heart disease because this individual has more sticky blood due to the increase of red blood cell production. Factor 5 leadens. This is also increase the abnormality of clotting. This individual will have higher risk of having DVT, okay, deep vein thrombosis. Hemophilia, happy bleedings. So we heard this abnormality. So this individual usually have several lack of clotting factors. So when they are bleeding, usually it's not easy to stop. Okay, so causing what we call the happy bleeding. This is hemophilia. Hemo means blood, philia means love to. So they love to bleed. So when it is bleeding, it's not easy to stop bleeding from this individual. Hereditary hemochromatosis. This is excess absorption of dietary irons in the bloodstream. Sometimes these irons can go to some organs like kidney, causing kidney damage or organ failures. And then porphyria variegata, this is deficiency of some enzymes. Okay. There are some causing some problem with these individuals. Sickle cell disease. This is mostly African American have this problem. They have abnormal shape and functions of red blood cell. So the red blood cell is not normal. So they carry less oxygen and also sometimes can clog the blood circulation. So causing the anemia, pain, and some other symptoms. Von Willebrand's disease. This is individual that have lack clotting factor, almost similar with the hemophilia. but it is less severe compared to the hemophilia. So these are some inherited disease. I think that's all for part number 4. So we'll see you again on the last part, which is part number 5 of blood discussion. Goodbye now.